Adrian Van.
Very bad spring, snowstorm.
Karen is married to Donal, living on a farm near Dungarvan. Karen is also a professional photographer, and Karen has very graciously volunteered to talk to you about something that happened on the farm in late 2017. Now, we're not trying to actually tell you you should be doing anything, but please take notice, because if something like this happens on a farm, are you properly prepared?
Thanks, Mike. Excuse me for using notes now, but it's quite an emotional subject, so it helps me to actually focus on the written word. You don't want to see me with tears running down my chin. Mike heard our story a while back on how vulnerable we were without an enduring power of attorney, and he has asked us to share it with you today. There are a few basic notes on enduring powers of attorney in the conference booklet for your reference, but we would caution you, we're not here to give you legal advice. We're just here trying to raise awareness by telling our story. What I'm going to tell you isn't in the booklet, so please bear with me and feel free to sit back and listen. It won't take long. 7 years ago, we were advised to create an enduring power of attorney. I wrote the advice down neatly in a lovely notebook and placed it carefully on a lovely shelf where it remained undisturbed. We nearly came to regret that lack of action a little over a year ago when Donal had a near catastrophic accident on the farm when he fell headfirst 22 feet through a shed roof onto concrete below. He was knocked unconscious, and because he was working alone, we still don't know how long he was out. I work as a commercial photographer, and as often as not, I'm away on a shoot with my phone off. That day, thankfully, I was working from home with my phone turned on the desk beside me. When I got a phone call from him at 1:15, I presumed he was calling to say that he'd be late for lunch. Instead, there was silence at the other end of the phone. Now, that silence is a very frightening sound. I could just about hear him breathing, but he seemed unable to speak. Eventually he spoke and he asked me where I was, and when I told him I was at home, he told me he'd done some damage. I asked him where he was, and I'd be down immediately. I found him slumped and obviously badly injured on the floor of the cubicle house. The cut on his head was so bad that I was wondering if I was looking at brain matter. When I told him I was going to call an ambulance, his response was, sure, there's no need for that. I'm not sure what his cunning plan was, but I decided to override it and I dialed 999. I got a terrific young man on the phone who took the details, and he asked me to remove any animals from the area, to place a vehicle with flashing hazards at the entrance to the farm, and then he asked me for the air code of the farm. Now here's the thing, I know the air code of our house off by heart, but I didn't know the air code of the farm, which was different. Our house is over half a mile away. So I had to go down, leaving Donal in the care of his brother, while I tried to look casual as I went into the farmhouse and find the air code, trying not to alarm Donal's mother, who was in her 80s. So note to self, know your air code, both for your farm and for your house, off by heart. It's how the emergency services get to you as quickly as possible. The ambulance was with us in a jiffy, and when I thanked the ambulance men for their speedy response, they smiled and said, "We prioritise farm accidents." That kind of stuck a chilling chord with me, I have to say, because there's a reason that they prioritise them, because they tend to be very serious. The ambulance medics were brilliant. They assessed Donal's injuries and discussed whether to have him airlifted to Cork or to go by ambulance to Waterford. Because he was conscious and able to answer questions, they opted for Waterford as it's nearer. They bandaged his head's wound, placed him in a neck brace and a body cast, and we headed for Waterford with the sirens blazing. On arrival at University Hospital Waterford, there was a team waiting, and Donal was whisked into A&E and then taken away for scans. His injuries were obviously very serious, but we didn't know how serious yet. While I waited for his return, I was faced with the horrible task of ringing our kids and letting them know. Donal's brother and mum would let his own family know, so I was spared that. But I was also faced with having to think about who would take care of the animals on the farm. The accident had happened, and it felt as if our world had stopped, but life goes on regardless, and the animals needed to be looked after, so more calls needed to be made. Basically, I was spinning plates and trying to keep them all in the air at once, unsure of what the future held. The scans came back and Donal's list of injuries was impressive. You can see the photograph of him there on the screen that was taken in A&E. A fractured skull with a bleed on the brain. He had fractured facial bones, including cheekbones, nose, eye socket, and a bleed in his eye. He had 3 fractured vertebrae in his neck, a hematoma on the front of his spine, a separated shoulder with 3 severed ligaments, and a broken wrist. And yet we were extremely lucky. He was millimetres from death, or from being a quadriplegic, or from being brain damaged, or both. Now, A&E doesn't want or need people hanging around, so that night I was sent home. And I was assured that every effort would be made to get Donal a proper bed that night. Climbing into our big empty bed that night, this is the part, it started to sink in how close we had come to disaster. How this empty bed could have been permanent, that we could have been a statistic on the 6 o'clock news, or that Donal could have been permanently, mentally, or physically disabled. It was only a matter of millimetres either way. What followed was a roller coaster ride of 12-hour days spent in the hospital looking after Donal, while the cavalry in the form of family and friends kept everything going at home. Donal was discharged 8 days later with a neck and a back brace, barely able to walk and suffering from severe concussion and with little or no sense of balance. It was a long, hard road to recovery. The thing is, no one plans on an accident. Donal had left home that morning expecting an ordinary day. I had answered the phone that day expecting an ordinary conversation. Despite the horror and emotion of the accident, you have to deal with the consequences. If Donal had died, we had a will, but it was ancient and outdated. For example, our youngest daughter, who's 22, she wasn't even mentioned in it. She came under the umbrella of any further issue. At least we had a will, though, and it would have been something to work with. But what if Donal had been brain damaged? The farm is in his name, so I would have had no authority to do anything with it. We'd never gone about getting that enduring power of attorney, which would have allowed me to look after Donal's interests in the case of him becoming incapacitated mentally. The advice that I had so neatly written and so safely put away on the shelf 7 years ago could have begun to haunt us at that stage. If, God forbid, Donal had been brain damaged, all of his assets would have been frozen. He would have been made a ward of court, and the court would have decided how he would be cared for and how his assets could be used to look after him. We would have been helpless. It's miserable enough to deal with the shock and emotion of a serious accident without finding yourself in financial hell. You need to protect your future and your family's future, and this situation needs to be planned for now, when there is no emotion and there is clarity of thought. You hope for the best, but you plan for the worst. We were lucky, we got a second chance. You may not. Again, we're not here to give you legal advice, just to make you aware of how vulnerable you may be and how vulnerable we were. We'd suggest you take legal advice and customise an enduring power of attorney to your own needs and circumstances. At the moment, you have a choice. Risk becoming a ward of court and allow the court to decide how you and your interests are looked after, which at the very least is very expensive, hugely expensive, not to mention impersonal. Or you can choose who you would like to look after you and your interests should you become incapacitated mentally. Farmers are a tough breed. They have to be. I don't think farmers fear death too much. Sure, they'll be dead and they won't know anything about it. And isn't it the natural way of things? But there is a middle ground, a ground between life and death, and that is scary. That twilight zone when an accident doesn't kill you, when you are alive but your brain is damaged, and that can happen too. This isn't just important, this is urgent. You don't know when an ordinary day will become an extraordinary day. It could be tomorrow. Learn from us and make an appointment to talk to a solicitor straight away. Now, this is the third time we've given this talk, and the last time there was a gentleman in the audience who got anxious because he thought Donal had lost the ability to speak because he was sitting beside me, not saying anything. So, to put your minds at rest, I'm going to actually ask him a question. Why, in your opinion, did we not go about getting an enduring power of attorney?
We didn't think it had happened to us, I suppose, is a summary of that. We should have known better because both Karen's parents and my parents have enduring powers of attorney, but they were old and we thought they needed it, and we persuaded them to do it, but we didn't need it because we were young. and nothing was going to happen to us anyhow. And what happened to me that day is the kind of thing that just happens to other people. And I only went up to change a photocell on a light, and I was walking back down across the roof, space sheeting, galvanized sheeting, and a sheet gave way, and that's the last I knew about it. So it's so simple. And you know, one of the surgeons in the hospital said to me, "You could have been killed or worse." And that really hit me hard, because when a professional puts it in terms like that, and he was right, there is worse, and we were very close.
Can I ask for any questions from the audience? Is there anybody there? The points about an enduring power of attorney are made in the conference booklet, but I would really urge you to put that on the top of your to-do list, and don't just leave it on the list. Actually actively pick up the phone and make an appointment to speak to a solicitor, and then make a decision from a position of knowledge rather than just from thinking, sure, no, it'll be grand. It mightn't be, and it could be too late when it happens to do anything about it.
Yeah, Karen, could I ask the first question? A lot of people think they're covered if they have joint accounts, you know, that they can carry on functioning. Is that accurate?
To a certain extent, it would probably protect you in the short term, but only if the joint accounts only require one signature. If it requires two signatures, you're in trouble. And even you have to look into the future. If a person is brain damaged, that could be forever. So, I mean, a joint account or joint names on land or anything like that, it's not going to work into the future. If you ever need to do anything, like sell a portion of land or anything like that, you need both signatures. Just one won't do. So, to be quite honest, I don't think joint names or joint accounts are going to actually cover it into the distant future. And I think, again, you need to take full advice on that. A lot of people we've spoken to have said, sure, I'm grand, you know. We've joint names, we have it in joint accounts. I wouldn't be comfortable, to be quite honest, leaving it at that. There will be issues, and there will be circumstances where that's not enough. And you'd be much better and safer to get something done like an enduring power of attorney. There's a lot of, you know, it's not a simple thing to put in place. There's quite a number of measures to go through. And even if somebody does become mentally incapacitated, it's not overnight that is put in place. You have to go to the High Court to get it registered. Doctors have to be involved. And also, if a person recovers and regains mental capacity, they can be put away again. You know, I don't mean the person, I mean that the enduring power of attorney can be stopped and they can regain control over their own assets and circumstances. So it's just a measure of control. It's like an insurance policy, really, to kind of protect yourself and your family.
I think just in the interest of time, we have to bring this to a halt. You know, that it's just to bring it to the attention of people, and we're suggesting that it's a matter of urgency, importance, to actually, as soon as you can, have a chat with your legal solicitor, because it's at a time, if something strikes when you're already not in great shape, to be faced with the further trauma that you know, that you're not in control of your own assets, it's pretty awful. It's taken, I'd like to compliment Karen. It's taken a fair amount of courage, we'll say that, you know, because it's an emotional, sensitive subject. So I'd like you to give her a big hand.